Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 5 of the Expressly Speaking podcast. I'm your co host, Aaron Katarik. I'm the Senior Vice President of Audience and Operations at Oahu Publications in Honolulu, Hawaii. And as usual, I'm joined by my co host, Jim Smith, the National Sales Director of the Steel City Corporation in Ashland, Ohio. Today, we have another special guest. Dr. Matt Lindsay, the owner and founder of Mather Economics in Atlanta, Georgia. We'll get to Matt here shortly, but if you've listened to or viewed any of our first 4 episodes, you know that Jim and I always choose a special Zoom background dedicated to our many years in the industry, and our background has a significance. So I'm going to start with Jim. What's the significance of what appears to be the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio?
Well, good day, everyone. So, as you may have learned in episode 1, my hometown is Canton, Ohio, and my first backdrop was the Canton Repository. Well, when I wasn't doing field trips to the Canton Repository, I was probably jogging, running through the park system in Canton, and every day my run would take me up the hill in front of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because I probably only lived about, I guess, an equate of 15 city blocks maybe to the Hall of Fame. So the Hall of Fame has been literally in my backdrop or background since I was a child. It means a lot to me that it's in my hometown. And as an adult, I've become one of the 100-plus year-round volunteers in the Professional Football Hall of Fame. So I've really enjoyed diving more into the history of the game than I thought I would have even as a fan. And then I'm also one of, literally thousands of volunteers every year when they have the enshrinement festivities in Canton, Ohio. So Hall of Fame is geographically and literally, I guess, near and dear to my heart then. And so greetings from George Hallis Drive in Canton, Ohio.
It should have been named Vince Lombardi Drive, but we'll save that for another day.
Well played, Mr. Katera. Well played.
Well, I have chosen for my background the Press Enterprise in downtown Riverside, California. And the reason I chose the Press Enterprise building is because that is the organization in which I had met our special guest, Matt Lindsay. So a little story. I'll try to make it as quick as possible. I started at the Press Enterprise in 2006 and met Matt probably circa 2008, 2009. A friend of mine and a former actually supervisor of mine in the industry, Sean DeWeese, was working for Matt and called me up and said, "Hey, we got this wonderful new program here." Back then it was called segmented renewal pricing. Today it's called market-based pricing. And it really intrigued me. And if you don't know, at the time, the Press Enterprise was owned by the A.H. Belo Corporation in Dallas, Texas. So I was working for Jim Maroney, who was president and CEO of the company at the time. And Jim wanted to use the Bain modelers to model out a rate adjustment for our subscribers. I felt that I kind of wanted to go against the corporate grain, so to speak, which usually I wouldn't recommend. And numerous times I brought Matt's company and his programs up to Jim Maroney to no avail. But after pestering Jim for quite some time, he agreed to meet with Matt and myself, Ron Redfern, our publisher, and Ed Lasak, our CFO. We actually met in a hotel in Phoenix, Arizona, in the lobby. And I'll never forget the first thing Jim really said to Matt was, "So you're the guy that's always talking about the Dallas Morning News and how we don't do subscriber pricing the right way." Paraphrasing, of course. Matt's laughing because he remembers that day. But we had a nice presentation, and it was one of the very few times where I was able to go against the corporate grain and come out victorious. Jim Maroney allowed us to move forward with Matt and his company, and it was a great relationship. And we did wonderful things with the programs Matt had to offer. And it was a great story. And I'll never forget that, Matt. And you and I have known each other, since that, time back in 2008. And you've really done a lot, not only for me, but for a lot of my peers in the industry, making us look good. So I appreciate that. So without further ado, I'd like to bring in Matt Lindsay. For those of you who may not know Matt, and I find it hard to believe that someone in this industry wouldn't know Matt Lindsay, but he's the owner and founder of Mather Economics in Atlanta, Georgia. Prior to that, he was an economist with Arthur Andersen, UPS. He's a graduate of the University of Georgia and did his graduate work at Clemson. So he's got two good football programs to choose from. So that's a pretty nice situation there, Matt. So, Matt, welcome to Expressly Speaking. I just wanted maybe if you could give a brief overview of your company. I know your company's really evolved over the years, and you have a lot of great services and products that you might be able to just touch on. And then also maybe give us just a 100,000 foot level of maybe some other businesses you assist in terms of econometric price modeling and such. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here. And I love that story with Jim Maroney. I'm a huge fan of his. He's a brilliant guy, and still stay in touch. And he tells that story whenever we're together. It's grown over time. So, but yeah, as you mentioned, I'm an economist. I started the company in 2002. I was with Arthur Andersen when it went through its Enron problems, and I hung out a shingle. And one of my first clients was Knight Ridder. I had done a little bit of work for them when I was at Andersen, and then Arden Dickey called me and actually asked me to come help them understand what was driving some of the changes in their traditional home delivery dynamics that they had observed. And I realized that newspapers had just a tremendous opportunity. They had all this great data on their customers, which is not a thing that most companies have, and that they could use that to improve the relationship. And that's really what was the genesis of market-based pricing, was how do you have a more one-to-one relationship with your subscriber that's economically better for both of you. So that was where it got started, and then ultimately started speaking at newspaper conferences and met wonderful people like Aaron over the course of the years, and just kind of gradually picked up newspaper clients as we went. And we have a unique model. I think one of the things about Mather Economics is we're not traditional consultants that other firms will hire, and they come in, they do an engagement, they leave. We're more of what we like to call business as usual. We like to be part of the team and work with our clients over years, and we're fortunate to do that. Aaron, you mentioned some of the other industries. We like to work with industries where we enjoy the economics are interesting, and the industries typically serve some unique purpose in society. One of the interesting ones is the lottery industry. We actually help lotteries optimize the prize structures of their lottery games so that they can yield more revenue that then ultimately typically goes to good causes in the states they work in. We were recently helping the wine industry with the COVID epidemic and the fires. They've had a terrible year, and the one bright spot in that industry is the direct-to-consumer channel. And wine companies have not traditionally had that relationship, and they typically have people come into the tasting room and you buy wine. And what we're helping them do is maintain those relationships and actually grow that direct-to-consumer channel that's much more profitable than the traditional three-tier distribution. And there's telecom. We work with the National Basketball Association. They have a subscription product now. Really, this direct-to-consumer subscription model has become ubiquitous, and there's a lot of people that want to do it, but it's complicated, and people in the newspaper industry have a lot to share in terms of the wisdom of how to do that well.
Well, great. I appreciate the synopsis there. And I think, I do a lot of speaking engagements, or at least I did prior to the pandemic. And I always used to ask, how many people here are utilizing Mather Economic Services? Now I ask, how many are not? Because there certainly are not a lot of companies that don't utilize your services. So, and that speaks volumes to the type of results you can help your clients get. So, I mentioned the coronavirus and the pandemic. Maybe we can just lead off with that. I got a couple questions here. First off, on content, should publishers have coronavirus content free or paid on their digital platforms? Here we decided to make that content free, here meaning in Honolulu. And we felt we had a civic duty to our readers to educate them as best we can on the virus, how to stay healthy. We just felt we didn't want to monetize a pandemic. So I know there is no right or wrong answer on this, but you have a lot of clients. Are most people offering their content in terms of coronavirus content for free in front of the wall, or is it paid behind it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that we've looked at a lot, and we have some reports that we published a report usually once a month during the COVID coronavirus crisis with benchmarks. And if anybody on this audience would like that, please encourage them to reach out to me. The answer is essentially what most people have done is similar to what you have, is they've put a lot of that kind of public interest information in front of the paywall. What we find works well, however, is if there's really long form, research pieces or things that people have written about their own community that are maybe not the general content that's out there, that we do encourage them to put that behind the paywall. Mainly because it's, again, you want to make sure that everybody needs the information they need to stay safe and healthy and protect their families. But if there are things that have to do with their community, maybe how it's impacting certain parts of the community, that is really value-added content that I think you can use to develop subscriptions. We have found that most of our clients have had a huge growth in digital subscriptions, mainly because the engagement with the demand for news content has grown so much that their audience, as a general rule, has become far more engaged. And the more engaged their audience is, the more people convert to subscriptions. So.
And I'm curious, kind of follow up to COVID, because I'd had a very similar question. And I know recently you had said on a webinar, put the best content behind the paywall, right? But so, you saw the increase in digital activity in the spring when COVID, arrived, for lack of better terms. Now here in Ohio, we're entering what they're now describing as our third wave of the COVID here in the state of Ohio. So I'm just curious, are you seeing waves of digital activity as well as this thing rises and falls in these communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do see that there is a correlation between COVID activity and online engagement. There perhaps is a little bit less of a, when COVID initially happened, there was so much uncertainty. There was so much, people were just starving for information.
Sure.
I don't think that the ratio of cases now is higher than it's ever been, but I think that the level of engagement has probably stayed high. So it's been a sustained, it's interesting when we see, to use a football example, we work with a lot of publishers whose teams win the Super Bowl, and you can see the engagement with the site really follow the progress of the team as they make it through the playoff, regular season, and the playoff wins, and then they get to the Super Bowl. And it's just such a cool thing to see, because you can really tell that a community gets galvanized around their team, and the newspaper really is the kind of almost like the meeting point. And we find that teams that make it through that process will generate a tremendous amount of traffic and subscriptions for their newspaper. The COVID process has been different because there's been a dramatic increase, and it's been sustained for months now. So it's generally it's been a good process, but we actually have people now that converted to subscriptions early in the COVID process, and now they're coming up for renewal, and it's interesting to see how those people have retained, and they've generally retained well.
Yeah, we brought that up on other episodes with our customer or with our special guest, and that was really talking about pricing. And I hate to harp on this, Jim and I probably talked about this with our last 4 guests, but digital subscription pricing, it's just too lucrative. And the reason we all know that is because one of the white papers Mather Economics did showed that on average, 17% of a newspaper's units come from digital, but only about 6.9% of the revenues come from digital. Therefore, you can make that correlation that the pricing is too lucrative. So let's talk about, is it too late to recalibrate our digital pricing as an industry? Because I think right now we've really pounded into the heads of the subscriber that a digital subscription is going to cost less than a print platform, even though the content is the same. So right now I see publishers charging via platform and not for content. So I want to get your thoughts on that. I know that was probably a lot of questions in there, but I think you catch my drift.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge opportunity. That's one of the things we have identified for a lot of publishers, that if you have a relatively an audience, a digital subscription base that's been around for a year or two, that they actually tolerate prices as well as, or better than print subscribers do. The biggest insight that we had about newspaper subscriptions is that really the biggest predictor of price elasticity is tenure. So if somebody's made it to their first year, there's a big decline in price sensitivity at that year mark. And then if you get to year 2 and year 3, there's even more of a reduction. So we find that people that are really truly engaged with your content, it doesn't really matter if they're digital or print, they really want that relationship, and they'll pay a comparable amount for it. We have quite a number of of digital subscriptions we're raising to levels that are comparable in profit to print subscriptions. So they may not be exactly the same price, but they generate the same operating margin after you take all the relative costs into consideration.
So this is another bugaboo Aaron and I go back and forth about, we kind of tease each other about. And again, it ties into something I heard you say. It remotely ties into something I heard you say in a webinar from August, but that you weren't a fan of free trials for things, right? So while it's not a free trial, a 6-month digital subscription for 89 cents is about as close to a free trial as you can get. Right. And I just wonder if you have A, data, or B, just a thought on that, these introductory offers that are just always remarkably low priced, and what does that lead to, or does that work, I guess, is the short question.
It's an interesting question. We have observed that there's different evolutions of a digital subscription business. So when it's like an iPhone, when the iPhone first comes out, the people that are lined up around the corner to get one don't need a cheap price. They're going to pay the $1,000. But as the Apple kind of saturates the market with that model phone, they gradually lower the price. And so what we've seen is a similar phenomenon in the media business, where you'll take like the New York Times, for instance. They now have 3 million digital subscriptions, and now they're really, that marginal digital subscriber for them is much more difficult to get now than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And now that Trump is leaving office, it may even get more difficult. So,
right.
So price is a lever that you can use that will help with subscriptions conversions. However, I think you don't necessarily it doesn't need to be the first lever that you use. And if you do offer a reduction in that price, you need to have, like any good negotiation, you need to extract something in return for that price. And what we've seen is that people that are dropping the price are typically getting longer commitments. Now, to your point, some people are doing a one-time payment of 99 cents or 89 cents for a 6-month period of time, and then the renewal cycle occurs. I mean, so, there does seem to be some evidence that is working for some subscriptions. I do feel like you will have higher churn than you would if you had, so it's a quantity quality trade-off.
Yeah.
It also has to do with the level of your meter. So if you have a very tight meter, you are going to have people that are getting hit with that paywall at a much lower level of engagement than if you had somebody that was hitting it at, say, the 5th article. And so price is a way to offset that, propensity to subscribe, that they're going to have a lower propensity to subscribe. So you want to take the price down in some cases so that you're removing that friction and getting them in the door. It's probably a more complicated answer than it's not an easy question, but that's my short version, believe it or not.
Yeah, there's just a lot of, like I said, lucrative price points out there. And I just find it hard to believe that we can move those people up the ladder when you're starting at 99 cents for 6 months. Not going to name any names, but I look at a lot of newspaper subscription price points and websites, and I see a lot of folks who are offering that 99 cents or that dollar, and then with the disclaimer, after the 3-month subscription period, you'll move to $24.99 a month. There's got to be a lot of churn there, but for some it is working. What I would say, for every time we mention maybe the Boston Globe or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, most of our listeners are going to be folks from the Tulsa Worlds and the Little Rock, Democrat Gazettes and the Savannah Morning News. So I don't think a lot of those strategies and tactics that some of the larger national specialty publications use really translate to the small local community newspapers. Is that true? Or are there some strategies and tactics that some of the larger players are utilizing? Can we utilize in our small to medium sized markets?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So I would, one of the latest big things we're doing with publishers is we're looking at the retention of profit from their subscriber base. Because when we look at digital subscriptions, they are growing, but a large portion of them were former print subscribers. And when we look at what they were paying as a print subscriber, the profit on as a digital subscriber is much lower. So what we're hoping to have publishers do is retain as much of that audience revenue as they can, and really more precisely the profit margin from that audience. So it's really helpful to do a profit analysis of your print subscribers, look at the ones that try to get them engaged, activate their digital access, get them engaged on digital platforms, and then have an intentional, well thought out migration plan over a long period of time that, because there will be some print readers that are just not going to activate on digital platforms. There will be always a segment there. And so you want to be able to understand, how do we profitably serve that audience for as long as we possibly can? And then, but those people that are, interested, really people care about the content. In many cases, they don't really care about the platform. That's secondary.
Mm-hmm.
I would just say, one of the risks of super low digital prices is that you may unintentionally cannibalize some of your print readers into a digital platform. So
that right there is my biggest fear. It's the great migration, I call it. And Jim and I are hockey guys. So if you took a hockey stick and you turned it upside down, that's what I worry about. That dip that someone will say, I'm charged $29.99 a month here for my print and digital subscription, but I keep seeing these $1 a month, $5 for 3-month offers on my social media, Facebook, in direct mail, and I'm going to migrate to that subscription price point and that subscription package. So that's one of my biggest fears. And I think those low introductory lucrative digital price points could incentivize people to migrate, and that really can hurt a newspaper, because if you have thousands of subscribers migrating from $24.99 to 99 cents, you're not only losing a good chunk of your subscription revenue there, but there still is a preprint game, and we're going to lose the preprint volume and the preprint revenue from those subscribers as well. So that's one of my biggest fears. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, just so to answer your question earlier about the local papers, I would not recommend necessarily that they take that 99-cent strategy without having reached a certain level of equilibrium with your digital subscriptions. We find there's really 4 main categories of subscription motivations. There's people that aren't community interested; they want to be part of the community. There's content. People read certain content that they're really passionate about. There's cause. People want to support the cause of journalism, and then there's the cost. And so the cost segment is the one that need the lower price, but there's a lot of other people that will subscribe at much higher prices.
Yeah. We just went through an election, and we're not going to talk politics on this show, but it seems like mainstream mass media outlets, to me, they're kind of dying due to a lack of credibility. Now, that's my own personal opinion. And I think that our last hope for credible journalism resides in the local community news outlets, such as some of the ones I've mentioned, the Seattle Times or the Salt Lake Tribune or the Honolulu Star Advertiser, the Fort Worth Star Telegram. I think it's our time to shine because we provide the most local, relevant, differentiated, and now credible news and advertising information out there. Either of you two agree with that or disagree with that statement?
Well, I'm all about the local paper. I jotted down those 4 categories that Matt said, and I'm putting a tick mark next to my name on every one. That's exactly why I want to become engaged with my local community paper. Commitment, content, cause, cost. So yeah, we have to count on the local community journalism being active and accurate and forthcoming and all that.
Yeah, I would agree. When I put my hat on, I say that there's the extent of the market is really where specialization occurs. So when you have like these, to Aaron, to your point about national media outlets, they're really playing in a national or even global market. And so the way they're going to differentiate themselves from their competition is to have particular perspectives on current events and news. And so they may, they're all professional journalists and they all do their jobs really well. But there is they're really jockeying for their audience. They're trying to engage with their core readers. When you have a local newspaper, your competition, you're still, and by and large, the only big journalism source in town. And so you are trying to serve your entire community. And so I think you're right. I mean, it's a local journalism organization has to have a more, what I would call, fair and balanced perspective, because you're not trying to differentiate yourself from other news outlets in town. You're trying to provide the best journalism you can in your area of the world.
Matt, you mentioned tenure as being the major indicator of someone staying or going, basically, in a nutshell. So you probably couldn't tell by the camera, but I'm not 21 years old, right? I mean, I'm the king of tenure. I'm the king of tenure when it comes to newspaper subscription. And I'm in that category, that we're the readers, right? But I'm curious about those digital platforms, because I'm a digital guy too. And I kind of throw out the Little Rock experiment and all that stuff. Do you find some differentiation with like the replica edition versus just, quote, digital edition? That the guy with tenure who's used to flipping the pages likes to flip the pages on the iPad as well, because it seems like I'm doing the same thing. Do you see any of that, or is that just me, hearing a few things and wondering?
No, I think there is a lot of evidence that does occur. That we do see that the print audience has a greater affinity for the e-edition because there is the similar user experience. I think I personally like that as well. I think those e-editions and I'm a little over 21 myself, so but I do actually like that. And all of us spend so much time online these days that it's nice for me to kind of have a print kind of experience. I think, if I read a lot of things, on an e-edition type of a platform or an app that has a kind of a print feel to it. So I think there is something to that.
Well, Jim, you might be the king of tenure, but that Star Advertiser pullover makes you look at least 10 to 12 years younger.
Well, I was going to bring that up, for our regular viewers, this is a trade-off. Aaron had the Steel City pullover a few weeks ago, and I got my Star Advertiser. It was an even trade, although I think, I have to admit, I think his quality was a little better than what I gave him.
Well, I'd like to take just a quick pause here to talk about our title sponsor of Expressly Speaking, the industry podcast. The Wilson Gregory Agency of Camp Hill, Pennsylvania is our title sponsor. And I would really like to thank Mark and Todd Gregory and Rick Hively for their support, not only of this podcast, but of the industry in general. They always take time and effort to support not only the industry, but industry organizations and trade events from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic. They're always there. and they're ardent supporters of the media industry. Thank you very much, Mark, Todd, and Rick, for your support. So thank you to the Wilson Gregory Agency.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you one more Wilson Gregory comment. My very first year at Steel City in 1991, the ICMA was still in existence. We were in Boston, Massachusetts, and the Wilson Gregory Agency sponsored a 5K run. And that was my first social activity at a big meeting like that. And I had the opportunity to run with the Olympian Bill Rogers, who was inducted into the Carrier Hall of Fame that year. But one for Wilson Gregory in the 5K, I won that opportunity. So thanks, boys.
Outstanding. Great story, Jim. So a little off topic, Matt. I see you're an author, and I've read your book, How to Succeed in the Relationship Economy. I believe you wrote it in conjunction with two of your partners from Amsterdam that I've met, two wonderful gentlemen. Can you just talk about the book a little bit, and if you have any other books on the horizon, love to hear about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. It's amazing. The book actually came out about 2 or 3 years ago now. So it was a fun project. We, as you know, we do some work in Europe and around the world. We're fortunate to do that. And the Dutch company was NRC, which is essentially the business newspaper in the Netherlands that's based in kind of the center of Amsterdam. And we did a series of projects with them, and we really got to work. They're radically very different newspaper organization than a traditional American newspaper. Historically, they've been 80% audience revenue, and this goes back to their, founding. So it's traditionally a very audience revenue driven media company, and they had a very, I would call it, personal relationship with their readers. And I was kind of it was kind of a blending of, I'm an American, obviously, they're European, I'm an economist, they're really at their heart kind of marketing people, and so on. And so we really had kind of an interesting mix, and we ended up having a wonderful experience with them. We experimented with the different types of offers, and ultimately they ended up growing print circulation from about 20 or 30%. I mean, it's really been a phenomenal story. And then now they've subsequently grown digital subscriptions quite a lot as well. So yeah, it's Xavier Van Leeuwen and Matthias Van de Peppel from now they're owned by Media House. And so Media House bought NRC after our project together. And then we started working with other Media House properties, and actually Media House is now an investor in Mather Economics. So it's come a long way.
Well, congrats on the book. Like I said, I've read it. Yeah, if you haven't had a chance to pick it up, folks, please do. It's a wonderful read, and again, excellent job, Matt, on that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the future. I know that it's kind of hard to see a month, a year, 2 years down the road. I think most of us in this pandemic-induced environment are really living day to day. I mean, I'm not really looking too far down the line, but for the sake of just this podcast, let's try to look down the line. And, Matt, in terms of the print product and the frequency in which we manufacture a print product, what's that going to look like down the road? I know a lot of newspapers are eliminating print days, from their rosters. Are we looking at a weekend package coming up shortly? Are we looking to go to Sunday only plus digital all access the rest of the days of the week? What are you seeing and hearing out there?
So we are working on several projects. We've completed several projects in this print day reduction area. We have got some really interesting case studies that have come about, whether we're, with different markets that have taken different steps in that way. We even worked with Advance many years ago when they were one of the first ones that actually did a dramatic change. We, in general, find that I would call more gradual transition is typically more successful than radical change. So if you have, and therefore I say on the order of years would be, take Saturday out, maybe take another day out. At the same time, you're really working on this digital engagement of your print audience. That's a multi-year process. I think anytime you really force a change on a customer, that's not going to be received as well as one that's given the time to kind of happen more naturally. Those are, again, every market's different, and each market has its own economic realities they're working from. And so I say this, if, everything else being equal, of course, but I think that we find that there are certain attributes of a print product that are very, very valuable to an organization. I think having a print product gives you a lot of brand credibility in your market. I think having that out there, it makes you very different. There's just something physical, it's something about being tangible that makes you seem, as a more powerful brand. So I encourage publishers to maintain that print presence. And, I don't think it has to be in the same format per se. There's a lot of flexibility that comes with new print models that people are experimenting with. But I personally think, and I know from an economic standpoint, people pay a premium to have a print product. And so I think high quality print products can be very economically viable.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Salt Lake. They've came out and announced their transition. We know that I think Tampa has went to, I believe, 2 days a week, and they're still early in that transition. So it'll be interesting to hear the results of their transition, so they can kind of be the guinea pig for the rest of us. What about advertising? I still value our ability to help our clients advertise through our print products. And do you have any thoughts on what advertising is going to look like in the future in terms of being able to still attract clients and advertisers to market their products and services in our not only print and digital products?
Yeah, I think that's another thing that the industry has really, I think, needs to communicate is we've actually, interestingly enough, done some other work for advertisers where we do what we call a media mix modeling type of an engagement, where we take their advertising spend by channel and impressions in sales, and we, through econometrics, can measure the incremental sales lift from different impressions by marketing channel. And what it enables us to do is statistically do some attribution of marketing impressions that's different than the last click attribution that you'll often get from digital channels, so to speak. And so we always find that an impression in a print product has a much greater incremental lift than an impression in a digital environment, it to the order of 10x. And so even though the compelling, I think print has the challenge of explaining to their advertisers why their prices on a per impression basis need to be so much higher than they are in the digital world. And I think that's just something that we're working towards. I think having the first party data also that newspapers will be an incredibly valuable resource, especially as the cookies kind of fade away, the third party cookies. So I think there's actually probably I'm actually kind of bullish on the advertising opportunity for media companies.
So true or false, there will be a print product in some format or fashion 20 years from today?
True.
Great answer. I wholeheartedly agree. There was no right or wrong answer. I mean, in my opinion, there was a wrong answer. But the reason I say true as well, and I think we brought this up with Pete Doucette, was, and this comes from our president and CEO, Dennis Francis, he said, if the average print reader at the Honolulu Star Advertiser is 58 years old, 60, 62, we think it's somewhere around there. Well, we have 20 years left, right? Average life expectancy is 77 to 82, somewhere in there, right? So we believe we have 2 decades left. Long tail that print subscription base and continue to accrue those print revenues. And in 20 years, hopefully, we have a better grasp of how to sell digital subscriptions and digital advertising a lot better than we're doing today. So that's why I agree with that. Any other thoughts on that, Matt?
I think you're right. I mean, I think the attributes of print I mentioned earlier will still be around. People will still like to have a print product. People, there's certain things that have been around forever and will continue to be there. even though there's, newer technologies out there, I think a print product is one of those. People will still want a print product in 20 years. It may arrive in the mail. It may have holographic images in it or something like that,
Sure.
but it'll still be a physical product.
Well, when did the Kindle come out? Does anybody know? Do either of you two know the year the Kindle came out? I don't know. 10, 15 years ago? I still pick up a book. I've never picked up a Kindle. I'm on an airplane, I pick up a book. I'm in my recliner, I pick up a book or a newspaper or a magazine. That's just me, but I'm not what I'll consider a mature reader. I'm 49. I'm not in the mature, or well tenured like Jim described himself.
Very well tenured.
So even though the Kindle's been out for 10, 12, 15, 18 years, we still pick up books. So I'm hoping that print newspapers are still around in some format and frequency 20 years from now. So.
Well, it's interesting that a different topic, but somewhat similar, because we're talking about, what people still like, right? In the retention area, again, I listened and I did some reading on some things you've done over the years and some webinars you performed. And you were talking about retention tools. And you specifically, and correct me if I misunderstood or misinterpreted, about the value of a note from a publisher in retention, that had more value than a gift card or a prize or something like that. And it kind of goes back into this argument. I still want that tangible little handwritten note means more to me than something that goes away right away.
Well, surprise and delight, right, Matt? Is that what that's called? Surprise and delight?
Yeah, that's one aspect of it for sure. I think, to Jim, to your point, I think there's people, I think in today, in today's world, people place so much value on the personal recognition or the relationship, the non-monetary relationships that people have. And I think, a brand like a newspaper, like the Canton Repository or the Star Advertiser or the Atlanta Journal-Constitution here in my hometown, that's to them, that's one of the things they identify with their home community. And so I think you have this, you want that institution to survive. And I think that in many cases people subscribe because they're going back to those 4 reasons for subscribing. They're wanting to support the cause of journalism, but they also want to support their local community. And newspapers are doing that. And so I personally think a thank you letter from the publisher of that institution that physically arrives in my mailbox, or even if it's an email, I think it means a lot to me because I feel like I'm part of the team, so to speak. There will be sometimes some people where a monetary gift, if it's unexpected and it's a value to you, is great. But I don't think it has to be. It doesn't have to be a monetary value all the time.
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating. You brought that up in a presentation. It made a lot of sense.
Thanks.
Yeah, in the past, one of Matt's company services was an incentive-based churn campaign that we utilized that Matt helped us institute here, and it was really looking at the propensity of an individual subscriber to churn out of your organization. And he and his company helped us determine certain actions or inactions or triggers that our subscribers either they would do something or not do something, and then we would maybe send them a postcard. We would send them a surprise and delight message, a gift card. And somewhat along the lines of what Matt was talking about is every subscriber reacts or acts differently to something you've done, whether it's pricing, whether it's service, whether it's content. And we have to reward those subscribers in a certain manner or persuade them to renew. And I think that's what his incentive-based churn campaign helped us do. So a little plug for that service of yours, Matt.
Well, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I always like Aaron's he's an early adopter of a lot of cool stuff. So again, I just want to say thanks, Aaron, because I know you've always been one to listen to a new idea and take a chance on it.
Well, we'll try anything here. You know, I work for a pretty innovative company, and we're small and we're private, and we can try things. We can, you know, I know we've mentioned this term before, but we can fail cheap and we can fail fast, and you know, we can touch the stovetop a couple times, and uh, you know, so. But the bottom line is, Matt, you're a great business partner who comes to publishers like us with great ideas. So I'm going to throw that back to you as well. A couple of kudos your way. Um,
That's
Another question.
fascinating stuff. I mean, the more I dove into this, that, you know, I've heard Matt speak, I've seen what he does, but the more I really dove into it for this, I was like, this is just amazing information. In fact, and not just to get into product by product, but I think you have something called the listener product. And I was just fascinated by the description of it, because it reminded me of something about how it says, you know, take your gathering high quality data and acting on that and findings. And I thought, you know, and you opened this podcast by saying how much data the media or newspapers had. And I'm thinking, yeah, and they didn't know what to do with it. I mean, honestly, not as an insult, it reminded me of back in the day when the old electronic mech first came out, and you could get all this software to read all this data. And then a year later, I'd go visit people. I'd say, well, what do you do with the data? Well, it's in the cupboard. You know, you know, they not take advantage of it. So it's fascinating that you know, what you're guiding people through this collection of data, because it tells a million volumes of stories, right?
No, it does. Thank you for mentioning the listener product. That was something that we started working on years ago, because there was a need for an audience first data tool set. That this is prior to all the technology that's out there now. There was really just audience measurement for advertising purposes, and we were trying to do analytics with those tools, and we found that you just couldn't get the right data together. And so we started developing a data capture tool set. Listener today kind of is a complement. It kind of is a, you know, there's a lot of tools out there that are designed to do things quickly on a website, and they're architected in that manner, and they don't capture a lot of historical data. They're not made for long-term analytics of content. There's, you know, tools that are made for dashboards of content on the site in real time. Again, they don't store historical data really well. So if you really want to do high quality analytics and you want to kind of tell the long view of where you've been and where you're going and so on, that's really what listeners intended to do, and we're continually evolving it too. So and Aaron, again, I thank you for being kind of a listener client, you know, early on. So many thanks, but more to come on that soon. I know we'll have a few things to announce here shortly, and you guys will be the first to know.
Great. We're looking forward to that.
Yeah, great stuff.
Another question I have was, or really a statement, is the rise of registration models. I think we've talked about maybe moving our website to a registration model. We're one of the very few newspapers in the United States with a hard wall, which I think has benefited us greatly in terms of growing our print circulation. But the ability to offer a potential viewer or reader of digital platform information, maybe a few stories a week free. If you give me some pertinent information about you as a reader, maybe that's a valid email address, maybe that's a cell phone number, a zip code, or maybe it's the more valid information you give about yourself, the longer I give you the opportunity to view information on our digital platforms. What are your thoughts on registration models, and do they work?
Yeah, they do. They absolutely do. That's actually a tactic we recommend a lot. We find that they actually have been in place for Europe for a lot longer than the United States, and we're seeing them. They're getting to be adopted here too. We've actually had a couple markets where once they have a registration wall, most of their digital starts actually come from email campaigns that they get from people that they have registered on their site. That the meter almost becomes almost a secondary source of acquisition. So I'm a huge advocate of meters, and it also enables from an analytics standpoint a much greater ability to model a behavior of an individual. And ideally, you're able to make that relationship much more personal with that data if they're logged in. So huge believer in those, and I think you guys are doing the right thing there. it kind of goes back to that monetary versus non-monetary transaction. People, when they register, in their minds, they are actually giving you some compensation for the content. They're giving you their email address, which is today, that's not a trivial thing people give away. And so that's, I would think of it almost as if they're paying for access to 1 or 2 or 3 articles, however much you give them.
Yeah, I think what we need to do too is remind the user, if you give us X, Y, and Z information about yourself, we're going to give you 14 days worth of access. And that 14 days is worth $17.99. I don't think we do a good enough job of reminding the user of how much it actually costs to view this content if you were a subscriber. You're not a subscriber, you're getting a trial, but if you were a subscriber, you would be paying X. And I think we need to do a better job of that. Well, Jim, anything else from you? I think I haven't, I purposely turned my cell phone off so I wouldn't look at it. So I don't know how long we've been going at it.
No, I think I just have one, and Matt, I don't know if this is something down your alley or not, but I'm just curious. There's been a lot of talk about the website, The Athletic. Okay, I'm not sure how familiar with it you are, but it's purely a subscription based model. They don't have advertising. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts or perspective on that model.
Yeah, so we are not working with exposure. And interestingly, one of their founders, his last name is Mather, and there's no relation either.
I did note that actually.
They generally, I think, going to what we were saying earlier about the extent of the market and specialization, they're going for a really nationwide, or not, if not global, market. And then so they're specializing in sports. I personally think that the newspaper industry, I've always thought, one of my hypotheses is that if newspaper organizations could get together, and I know they're moving in this direction now, and collaborate, you could offer a competing, product in a sense where you could, all the markets that are in NHL hockey towns could offer a hockey league pass subscription where you would get stories about all the different teams. I think that's something that could be pulled together ultimately, and it may well already be on, heading that way.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I know some of the groups are doing that, with if they're across the country, with the collegiate football packages, or just, I don't know if they're doing it officially, sharing a lot of content one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think content syndication is an opportunity for newspapers as well. I think that they're not only in the sports area, there's a lot of, markets that have very unique content, like Canton, Ohio has the, Hall of Fame. They could have a really cool thing on the NFL there if they, possibly.
Well, Matt, I know you're a busy man, and I just wanted to thank you for spending, 45 minutes to an hour with Jim and I, and hopefully the rest of the industry, for our viewers and our listeners who are going to view this. I'm sure they will enjoy your insight and your feedback as to what you're seeing, not only in North America, but globally. I'd like to just salute you for what you do for the industry. You run an award-winning company. You really have done a lot to further my career through some of the results and ideas and insights you've given me over the years. And I know I could probably speak for many, many others in my peer group that would say the same thing. So it's really a partnership. That's what I like about your company is we're truly partners. And just to give you an example, that I remember when I was at the Press Enterprise in Riverside, we used to have weekly calls, and Matt used to take time out of his busy day as president of the company to sit on those calls. So that just speaks volumes about you and what your company brings to the table. So thank you very much, Matt. And thanks for being our guest.
Yeah, fantastic stuff, Matt. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, and the feeling's mutual. I love working with the industry and all the great people. So thanks guys for having me.
Well, that'll do it for episode 5 of Expressly Speaking with Dr. Matt Lindsay of Mather Economics. Episode 6, we have another special guest. Alan Fisco, president of the Seattle Times and president of America's Newspapers. And Jim is chuckling because he's a fellow Ohioan. Is that how you say it? Ohioan.
We just call ourselves Buckeyes. The Ohioans too hard to say.
Yeah. Being a Badger, I'm never going to utter the word Buckeye. And I don't think Matt will either, being a UGA fan. But we're excited to have Alan as our next guest.
Absolutely.
Alan is a wonderful man, a leader in our industry, and he's a fellow circulator. And Jim and I love when the fellow circulators work their way up all the way to the president and CEO ranks at a media company. So stay tuned for episode 6. Until then, thanks for enjoying the best damn podcast in the land.
Bye, everybody.